So I'm here with John Binkley with the Ward Cove Dock Group, and for those of people mostly here in Ketchikan that don't know who you are, John, tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, I was born and raised in Fairbanks. My grandparents actually came to Wrangell in southeast Alaska in the early 1900s, 1917. My grandfather was a riverboat pilot, piloted riverboats all over Alaska, settled in Wrangell, running on the Stikine River, between Wrangell and Telegraph Creek, hauling freight and supplies up there. That's where my dad was born in 1920. Then in late 30s, early 40s, he left Wrangell to go up to the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. Met my mom there, started running riverboats on the Yukon and the Tanana rivers in the summertime as he was going to school, and ended up marrying my mom and starting a tug and barge business on the Yukon River out of Fairbanks, and then eventually it turned into a tourism business in 1950 and did tugs and barges and tourism for a bit of time, and then eventually sold the tug business, stuck strictly with tourism, and that's the business I grew up in Fairbanks. Sternwheel riverboats that we operate and still do now through 5 generations on the rivers of Alaska.
And you have wife, kids.
Got a wonderful wife of almost 43 years now, have 4 adult children and 10 grandchildren.
All right. Obviously, I'm here today to kind of ask you a little bit about, you are trying to either thwart or counter the efforts to recall the current governor, Dunleavy. So that implies a support of him. He's come across with a fairly drastic budget, and some of that's substantial cuts. We have a fall in oil revenue. What is it that you would support or say to the governor, hey, we're going to have to come up with some revenue somehow? What is there anything in that area that you would support?
Well, for me, I've been politically active all of my life. My father was in the legislature in the early days, the first days of statehood. I was in the legislature in the 80s, both in the House and the Senate. Ran for governor at one point, so always been interested in what's happening with politics in Alaska. And what concerns me about the current recall effort is when I look at what the justification for the recall is, the 4 measures, I just don't believe that that rises to the level of taking what is an unprecedented step in Alaska's history.
Well, so in your efforts, would you have staked any money at currently? Is this just kind of a armchair effort?
It's just started, so I don't even have a name for the group yet, although I'm looking at moving Alaska forward, because that's really what I'm trying to do, is to get people to understand the potential damage that this could cause to the state. There's a lot of the things with Governor Dunleavy and his policies, the way he's gone about things, that I don't agree with. But the point is, the items that we're talking about to recall him, I just don't believe rise to the level of that drastic of a
So
step.
those are legal reasons they've actually come up with the recall group. But there are legal reasons the governor ran. And one of them he was very adamant about was it's legally that we get this PFD at its full payout. So I find it a challenge that if we're going to have a consistent legal basis, we can have a legal recall, but you also are standing up for a person that ran on a legality essentially. So how can you have both? Or not have both, or counter the legal?
Right, he ran on a lot of things. I know some things I agreed with, some things I didn't. One of the things that he's been most stringent on, or most emphatic about, is the law that lays out how the permanent fund dividend is calculated and paid out to Alaskans. In my opinion, that's not a strong argument for the policy that we've got about what we pay out. The courts have actually determined that the legislature can appropriate whatever amount that they feel necessary to pay a dividend. They can.
The first question was, hey, revenue's falling. What is it could you support, or in the terms of revenue at the state level?
Well, right now, the biggest revenue source for the state is the earnings from the permanent fund. And when we start paying out dividends and larger dividends, that reduces the amount of revenue that's available to pay for basic state services. And if we, to me, I think we need to start to reduce that dividend in order to take care of essential state services. Now, given the things that have happened just in the last few days, really, as the price of oil has tumbled, has also brought down our oil revenue. But still, today, the biggest source of revenue is the permanent fund earnings. And so, to me, that's the likely source. To me, as an Alaskan who voted for the constitutional amendment to establish the permanent fund, that was my interpretation of what the earnings were to be used for, was for taking care of essential state services once our oil supplies started to diminish. So
None of these other revenue, I mean, you're talking about going to one revenue stream, and that would be the earnings on the fund. No, the governor's not even himself coming up with any other forms. I think there was one possible, maybe see where I'm going with the question?
yeah, no, I understand the question, and at some point that may be the case. For now, at this point in time, I believe that if we reduce the permanent fund dividend, that there's the funding available to take care of essential state services.
Okay. Is that the governor that you're supporting is not coming up with any income to offset the oil revenue decline? That's where that's the point of the question.
Yeah.
And you're saying, whatever, that doesn't matter. His opinion, I clarify that for me.
Yeah, well, his opinion does matter. He's the governor.
Yeah.
And he was elected by the people of Alaska to be governor. And my point about the recall is that if we just don't like the policies of the person we just elected, that it's a slippery slope if we start saying, okay, we don't like what he's doing, we're going to...
The governor's policy or budget proposal at least have really affected infrastructure here in Ketchikan and business investment all the way to geoduck divers, shellfish growers, onto the roads. You now have an infrastructure here that depends on that. I mean,
You bet.
does that affect your support of the governor?
Well, again, it's not supporting the governor, it's opposing the idea of the recall. And it's not really to me about this governor, it's about what we're doing as a state in this process of trying to recall under very thin and limited legal means because we don't like the governor. And so that's the distinction I'm trying to get people to draw. And I know it's an esoteric and a difficult to get your mind wrapped around when you maybe don't like the governor.
Well,
But to me, it's not a reason to recall the governor.
I don't think it's, at least from the people I've talked to, it's not that they don't like him.
Well, his policies.
It
They don't like his
becomes
policies.
transferred to a dollar coming to their community. That's
Yeah.
kind of, so it becomes a policy, possibly some legal grounds. So obviously that's their case, at
Yeah.
least.
But I care a lot about the state, all of the state. I care about Ketchikan. As you've said, our family's invested a tremendous amount of money here at Ward Cove in Ketchikan, and we depend on it being a thriving economy and a community, and we want to see it exceed
Sure.
as all parts of the state. So some of his policies concern me, and I don't support some of his policies.
Yeah.
But I just don't believe it's prudent for us to recall him in the middle of a term.
These are all, so,
Well-
go ahead.
I would just like to thank you for doing this, Larry. I
Yeah.
think it's great. I've watched some of your pieces on Sit News,
Yeah.
and it's great to be able to get the debate out there on video, get it out for people to see, and I appreciate your efforts.
Okay. Thanks for talking, John. Hey, thanks for watching Ketchikan, Alaska News. This is a little hobby effort of mine to try and bring one daily story to people here in Ketchikan or past members of the community, people who love and like Ketchikan. I try to do just political stories or stories of interest, sports and so forth. If you have any ideas or suggestions, you can email me at ketchikanalaskannews@gmail.com. You can also contribute. It takes a little bit of money running around doing this kind of thing. So there's a donate button on the opening page of the YouTube channel. It helps if you subscribe, like, comment, share all these videos that are free to do that. So please do that. Any other comments or suggestions, just give me an email or give me a call. Thanks again for watching Ketchikan, Alaska News. Don't you love that snow?